Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt, August 28th, Monday. Now, I think summer's over. Some people want to technically argue the case with me, but kids went back to school. Parents were celebrating summer's over. They sort of went back to school. I'm not sure some of the public schools ought to qualify as schools. Welcome, Monday morning. That means a couple things. Today's podcast, the Grand Old Pod over at the Universe, which you can now try out for 99 cents. If you've been wondering what that's all about, go sign up for a week or a month. I don't know what it is. For 99 cents, listen to the Grand Old Pod, which I do on Monday and Wednesday, and Dwayne does Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and find out about it. This weekend was a lot of bad news. The worst was, well, there are a couple of bad stories. 3 innocent people killed in cold blood at a dollar store in Jacksonville by a racist. And this racist is a crazy man. He had been taken in for an involuntary psychiatric assessment under the Baker Law when he was 16, which I do not know how he was able to purchase the weapons. And he had earlier gone over to the historically black college in Jacksonville and was going to shoot that up, but security scared him away. There are many, many mentally disturbed people in the United States, some of whom are racist and some of whom are other things, but none of whom should get guns. That's my bottom line. I will be talking to Ambassador Nikki Haley about that later. If you were listening to Fox News on Friday night, you heard me assess the debate, and I did winners and losers in Candidate Casino. Let's go over to Candidate Casino first from Friday night, cut number 25.
Hugh, where are you on the GOP primary after the debate?
Well, since I think Governor DeSantis and Ambassador Haley won, I've moved my chips around. 40 on the former president, 40 on Governor DeSantis, 10 on Ambassador Haley, and 10 on the field. One of the former president's people told me the president was not pleased with my wager because he's so far ahead. I have to be candid. If you're not campaigning, if you're not doing debates, if you're not doing radio shows, if you're not doing television shows, if all you're doing is Tucker, you cannot win this nomination. He's got to go back. And especially as he gets sucked into these trials, he's got to go back. I discussed why I thought this was cut number 23.
Hugh, your thoughts of it and what it means?
I think it inevitably hurts the former president's bid to be renominated. Now, he's still ahead. He's still ahead by a lot. But among the Republicans I know, there are never Trumpers, sometime Trumper, always Trumpers, and only Trumpers. The always Trumpers are starting to fray a bit because this is a lot, and 4 in a row is a lot to deal with, and they're doing the best they can to make this lemonade, but it's not a good day for the former president. So it wasn't a good day, and so I wrote back to the Trump strategist, tell the former president he's welcome on this show any morning, indeed every morning. He's the best interviewer in America, but you got to show up, and you got to be on the campaign trail, and you can't just do Tucker. You have to do Tucker. You got to do the debates. Now, what do we know about the Jacksonville shooting? Not much, except that Ryan, I'm not going to say his name, the 21-year-old who killed himself, was a stone-cold racist and mentally disturbed. I thought Governor DeSantis had a very good statement about the murders after they occurred. Let's go play that cut number 4.
I was able to speak with Sheriff T.K. Waters in Jacksonville about the horrific shooting that took place. This shooting, based on the manifesto that they've discovered from the scumbag that did this, was racially motivated. He was targeting people based on their race. That is totally unacceptable. This guy killed himself rather than face the music and accept responsibility for his actions, and so he took the coward's way out. But we condemn what happened in the strongest possible terms. We've offered support for Sheriff Waters and the city of Jacksonville, and we send our condolences to the victims and their families who were the victims of a very cowardly act.
You know, the governor attended the vigil last night and spoke, and some morons actually booed him. And honestly, there's some things that are not political, and the murder of your fellow citizens, whether or not you agree with the people who run your state, is not an occasion for politics, an occasion for grieving. 3 Marines were also killed in a helicopter accident in Australia over the weekend. 5 were seriously wounded. Another Marine, F-18 pilot, crashed and died in San Diego near Miramar. So it was a bad, bad weekend for the Marines, and our hearts go out to all of the great men and women of the Marines. Florida is facing a significant hurricane threat. as Adela moves towards it. Adela brushed Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and it was a bad day for them as well, but it didn't take the full brunt of it. Florida has to get ready. This brings me back to the last day of our Food for the Poor campaign. I'm not going to bug you anymore, but I'm going to ask you one more time. This is going to be a horrific hurricane season, an absolutely horrific hurricane season. And we've already had 2 storms, one of which hit Haiti and DR square on, the other one is brushing by it. And so I would love if you would please step up and donate today. Anitra discusses why it's so important to be a participant in Food for the Poor today.
Your gift means everything because it gives them peace of mind. Imagine being a parent and knowing, okay, you're suffering, but how will you provide for your children? How can you maintain a peace and a calm when they're seeing that they've lost everything? Right now, your gift during Blue Skies changes the trajectory of a family's future. That's what we're inviting you to be a part of right now.
Now, I am hoping the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I support Food for the Poor. I only allow people to sponsor campaigns on the program that I personally support. So we wrote a big check. And if you will write a big check, and maybe a big check for you, it depends. That's the widow's mite, right? If you've got $100 in the bank account, a big check is 10. If you've got $1 million in the bank account, a big check is, well, 10,000 is still a big check. If you can afford 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, maybe 100,000, these people get the relief supplies to the folks that nobody sees. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com. I love Food for the Poor. They've been doing it for many, many years, and they know what they're doing. Or you can text my name, Hugh, H-U-G-H, to 91999, or you can phone 855-359-4673. And if you're one of the families that spent, the weekend getting ready for back to school and you went and spent, $200, think maybe about $20 for the kids who've got no schools and now no food because this hurricane, these tropical storms, and what a season is ahead. And the governor was warning people about Idalia. I want to fire whoever names the storm. Idalia, really. There's a lot of Ramaswamy Pence back and forth over the debates. And I'm going to go back again to special report on Friday night where I was playing Candidate Casino. So I want you to hear what I thought about the debates with Candidate Casino. That would be cut number, Candidate Casino, something Brett does every Friday. Cut number 25, who's going to win the Republican nomination was the question.
Hugh, where are you on the GOP primary after the debate?
Well, since I think Governor DeSantis and Ambassador Haley won, I've moved my chips around. 40 on the former president, 40 on Governor DeSantis, 10 on Ambassador Haley, and 10 on the field. I also got to name winners and losers, by the way. And so here are my winners and losers of the week. I mess up my winner because the former governor of Ohio is Ted Strickland. You'll hear how I screw up the dismount. Cut number 26.
There's Hugh first.
Ted Strickland, ambassador, Ted Carter, the ambassador, the Admiral Carter is the new president of the Ohio State University. He's arriving in time for Marvin Harrison's Heisman season. So congratulations to the new president of the Ohio State University.
Loser?
The loser is the judge in Georgia, Scott McAfee. What a nightmare to be in charge of the Trump trial. It's going to be Lance Ito 2.0, and I feel bad for the judge already. I do. I feel awful for the judge because 2 of the 18 defendants have petitioned for a speedy trial, as is their right. Of course, the former president wants to slow it down. And again, the former president isn't happy with me this morning, I'm told, because of this comment on special report, cut number 25.
Hugh,
23.
where are you on the GOP primary after the debate?
No, cut 23.
Hugh, your thoughts
cut 23,
of it
Harley.
and what it means.
I think it inevitably hurts the former president's bid to be renominated. Now, he's still ahead. He's still ahead by a lot. But among the Republicans I know, there are never Trumpers, sometime Trumper, always Trumpers, and only Trumpers. The always Trumpers are starting to fray a bit because this is a lot. And 4 in a row is a lot to deal with. And they're doing the best they can to make this lemonade. But it's not a good day for the former president. It's not a good day when your mugshot is taken, ever. They made a lot of money from it, but I responded to the president's staff, as I said. He's always welcome here every day, every hour, because he's the best interviewer in the world. But you can't win the nomination by not campaigning. You got to campaign, and you got to do the debate. That's my humble opinion. You can't win the nomination if you don't show up and ask for people's votes on radio shows, on television shows, and on big stages. I'll be right back, America. Don't go anywhere. There's a lot more news on today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Good morning, America. I got to tell you, I was encouraged at Mass yesterday for the first time in a sermon in a long time. And that's because a priest who's a capable man, not the world's greatest homilist, was giving a homily on the succession of Peter, the fact of apostolic succession. And it's a fact. You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church. That's Jesus talking. That's nobody else. If you're a Christian, you've always got to ask yourself, you know, Calvin and these guys and Luther, they got going in the 1500s. What was going on for 1500 years? The apostolic succession. Hello. So anyway, this is about the apostolic succession. And the priest pauses and said, and Pope Francis is the Pope. He's not the anti-Pope. Benedict retired. You can retire. It wasn't the first time ever. But then he said something that really encouraged me. He said, and I know a lot of us are often disappointed with the Pope and his rather unusual statements and off-the-cuff remarks. I almost stood up and started clapping, which you're not allowed to do, actually, because I feel bad when I say things about the Pope like he's a loopy anti-capitalist from Argentina, and no wonder he has a weird view of America because Argentina has a weird view of America. And did you know that the president of Argentina was buried in the Metropolitan Cathedral in which he said Mass every day? So it's really a screwed up place to come out of. They have a state religion. So, and they had a dictator, and they had the most evil man in the world, according to the late Chris Hitchin on this show. So I'm not surprised that the Pope is clueless about economics and about politics, but he's also completely wrecking the theology. And then the pastor said, we got spoiled. We had John Paul the Great, St. John Paul the Great, and then we had Benedict, who will be a doctor of the church. And I might be confusing what he had to say, but he was basically saying, we had these two great theologians, and then we get Francis. And he said, we pray for the Pope every day. And I think confused me, threw me a curveball. I thought you said the first three prayers for the Pope when you did the rosary. He said the last three prayers for the Pope. But whatever, his point was, the Pope, don't worry about it. The church goes on forever. And he's right. If you take the long view, you get a Gregory the Great every few hundred years, and we got two in a row, theologically speaking. Now we have to deal with the dumb Germans who are destroying the church in Germany and want to bring down the house around us. But I'm in a good mood because I finally heard someone from the pulpit say, the Pope isn't exactly the guy we thought he was going to be, and he was supposed to be a short-termer, but he wasn't. And the guy's pretty old now. He's older than Joe Biden, which means he's really old. And, people just take advantage of folks who are 85. Speaking of age, the Ramaswamy-Pence clash, according to the New York Times, shows new right's radical break from Reaganism. No, it doesn't. It shows stylistic differences.
Walking with my feet 10 feet off a beam. Walking in Memphis.
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. I was walking in Portland, Maine on Saturday. We drove down from Mid-Coast to Portland, fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I. We don't know anything about Portland, Maine. Nothing, except having had a dinner there a few times. So we take a walking tour, and it was fascinating. The city's burned down 4 times, and that was interesting. But I learned as I did that cobblestones, they're not cobblestones, they're pavers, are really not the world's greatest thing to walk on for a long period of time. But wonderful, wonderful city that's soon going to be the center of artificial intelligence in the United States because of Northeastern University's decision to build an AI campus up here. And that's very, very smart. They're going to focus resources on a campus, and they're redeveloping it. It's very, very smart. It's not very, very smart buying 55,000 acres of land in California because you want to build a new city. And that was the story that I spent a lot of time thinking about this weekend. The New York Times broke the story on Saturday. The Silicon Valley elite who want to build a city from scratch. A mysterious company has spent $800 million in an effort to buy thousands of acres of San Francisco Bay Area land. The people behind the deals are said to be a who's who of the tech industry. And they are, indeed, a who's who of the tech industry. They are under the heading of the Flannery Associates. The Wall Street Journal explains investors bought nearly $1 billion in land near a California air base. Officials want to know who exactly they are. Well, who they are wealthy billionaires in Silicon Valley, including, among others, Michael Moritz, who's a billionaire venture capitalist, and a couple of young men. Jan Sramak is a trader at Goldman Sachs, and a couple other guys said, we got an idea. Let's buy up all the land in Salena County that we can. So they have bought up 55,000 acres. Now, if you divide that by 640, you'll figure out that it's about 80 square miles of land. And they want to do a city. Now, I'm no stranger to this topic because I spent 30 years, I'm retired, as a land use development lawyer in Southern California for the largest landowners in Southern California, Tajon Ranch, for Mission Viejo Company, for the Irvine Company, for every builder you want to name. And the largest single project I did was 10,000 acres for Lockheed Corporation. I know what they think they're doing. They think they're doing what Mission Viejo and Irvine are, master plan communities. And that's because Mission Viejo and Irvine were run respectively by brilliant geniuses of the 60s when urban planning was a thing. But in the 70s, Richard Nixon signed the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and California followed with its own versions of that. And now land use in California is a nightmare, and getting anything built is a nightmare. So these guys are too smart. All right, so I'm thinking to myself, they're too smart. They've got to have done due diligence, right? They've got to know about the California red-legged frog. They got to know about the California tiger salamander, fairy shrimps all over the place, various breeds up there. The giant garter snake is a perennial pain in the neck. And we don't even talk about Swainson's hawks or the calliope silver spot butterfly. There are more endangered species in Solano County than there are wineries. So these guys go out and they buy $800 million. And I just spend my time. They can't be that stupid to think this is going to happen. And I mean, you start with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the Army Corps of Engineers, the United States EPA, California Department of Fish and Game, California EPA, the Regional Water Quality Control Board, and you're looking at a 40-year development. And some companies, like Party, publicly traded company, subsidiary of Weyerhaeuser, was my best client, my very best client. Leonard Frank was my favorite client with whom I'm still in touch. He'd been retired too for a long time. And we would get together and we would by inch and foot and yard move a development forward. And so many developments take 25 years. I mean, I worked on one development 3 times because recessions come along and you stop. And so a bunch of billionaires got together and they said, let's do what Walt Disney did in Florida. Well, they can't be that stupid. They can't be that stupid. This thing will never happen. It will never, ever happen. If it does, it'll end up being, if they bought $800 million and it actually is 85 square miles, they'll end up with, 4 houses to the square mile. You can always do that. There's certain things that the state has to let you do, but you're not going to do it on a wetland or a water of the United States, and you're not going to do it on endangered species habitat that's occupied. You're going to jail. Now, they may be counting on the Pacific Legal Foundation and the United States Supreme Court majority that currently sits to reinvigorate the Fifth Amendment, and more power to them if they want to sue their way there. But I read a couple of the press releases, and these guys are saying the classic wrong things, like we want to work with the stakeholders in the community. There are no stakeholders. If you own the property, you own the property. We don't care about who's next door. If you're not Red Chinese, if you're not the Chi-Com, buying up land next to Travis so you can spy on Travis Air Force Base, nobody cares what you do. You can try all day long. But they didn't even mention the feds. They have no idea what they're doing. This is my guess, is that they went out and hired some land use consultant who realized you got a big fish on the hook and they're going to play him. Unless they have a plan. And the only plan that makes sense, the only one, is what we ended up doing with the Lockheed property, which is you upzone it and give it away for the tax value, the tax deduction. This is a tax planning strategy because it's such a nightmare. Look, it's not a nightmare for the lawyers. All my kids went to college on the Endangered Species Act and the Clean Water Act and the California Endangered Species Act and CEQA and NEPA and the California Coastal Commission. May they forever rot in land use hell. But maybe they know that. And maybe they're saying the worst it is a tax deduction for tax planning purposes. Maybe they've got the kind of accountants that billionaires ought to have. And they know that they've got to write off investments at some point. They've got to offset gains that they make in tech. Now, it is possible that they made their money in the unregulated space of Silicon Valley. I mean, nobody told Steve Jobs he could or could do nothing. One of Steve Jobs' widow is deeply involved in this group. Nobody told the people who started Google and the people who started Facebook, nobody told them what to do or couldn't do because they're an unregulated space protected by the First Amendment. Land use is not such a space. It's regulated by local, state, and federal officials. Moreover, there are statutes that apply that bequeath citizen standing on anyone who wants to sue you. So you can do a deal with every single person in Salena County and every Fed and every state official. And at the end, if one person changes their mind, they can sue you and delay the development for 10 years. This is my life. I know this life. I was doing radio and television the whole time, but I've always had a condo in the broadcast field. But my life, my living until I retired in 2016 to do media full time was land use law in California. But I also did Nevada and Oregon and Palau and Hawaii. I went all over the place for endangered species and wetlands, and I know it pretty well. I kind of forgot more than most people know. And if you ever need an endangered species lawyer, the best one in California is named Andrew Hartzell, and my former partner whom I trained. And Andrew has actually, he's better than I ever was at it because he got more patience for the morons running some of these agencies than I do. And he will dutifully call them 5,000 times if that's what it takes to get them to move because they lost the plan. And he'll send it to them again and again and again. But the Habitat Conservation, they can't be intending to break ground on a planned community in Solano County. It's not possible. So here's what I think we ought to watch for. Now, I'll be gone. You know, in the 50 years it takes for this to happen, I'll be dead. I'll be in heaven with the angels. But I'll be laughing if they're actually trying to develop this. But what I suspect they are doing is they're going to upzone part of it and then donate it for the higher value. And that's perfectly legitimate. They'll give a conservation easement over it. Maybe they'll get one house per square mile, and they'll do a conservation easement. But if they really intend to build a city in Solano County, then they're morons. Then it proves that Silicon Valley is happened because at the intersection of need and technology, a few people were standing around near Stanford's campus. That's it. That's the whole deal. Silicon Valley is not some story of genius. It is the story of technology advancing to meet unmet needs in a particular place at a particular time where a lot of people had a lot of money. And they stayed there, which is kind of stupid because you get taxed at 13.5% if you're a billionaire and you can't hide your money. And some people do, like Peter Thiel put his PayPal stock or something into a Roth IRA, so it's got billions in it and can't be taxed. And they get mad that smart people do lawful tax avoidance schemes. There's nothing wrong with a lawful tax avoidance scheme. In fact, I had to laugh this weekend. There's a story out that the SALT deduction cap didn't work out the way the feds thought. They were going to cap the deductions that people could get from state and local income taxes at some amount. Turns out that everyone can figure out how to avoid that. Because, number one thing you do if you have money, you pay off your mortgage if you can't deduct it anymore. All right, so that's a lot of people did that. Number two, you get an LLP to buy whatever property you're using for a business, and it works because of the pass-through deduction in the Trump tax reform. But I really, given what they're doing, which is the playbook for losing, it is the playbook for losing a land use war. There were two kinds of land use lawyers, me and everybody else, and I won. And that's because I never, don't do stakeholder meetings, don't hire PR consultants. You can never get 100% in a citizen standing environment. Don't do that. Let's go to war. And not war, but let's go plow every field that doesn't have an endangered species in it and tell them to pound sand. Let's push aggressively on jurisdiction. If they threaten you, we'll sue. If anyone says you're in a critically habitat occupied area, challenge that, hire biologists, send in the hearings, and if, God forbid, fire should sweep over your land, never let it grow back. That's number one. My greatest land use victory happened after a massive fire destroyed a bunch of California gnatcatchers, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service said to me, you can't build there. Gnatcatchers used to live there. And I said, bring the tractors, boys. They got nothing. And they did. So I'm very aggressive, very, very aggressive. These guys are not. These guys are lefties who want to make everyone feel nice. I have seen it again and again and again. There's a whole bunch of land use lawyers. Let's make nice with everyone. Cannot be done. Defend your property rights. Go to the mat. Sue everybody who gets in the way. And maybe you'll get some houses built. They're promising parks and development. People up there don't want parks and development. They want to be left alone in Solano County. Really, they do. So this must be a tax avoidance strategy. That's all I can come up with. Welcome back, America. Time for the Yinzer Report by my friend Salena Zito, camped out in somewhere near Pittsburgh where there are signs of life occasionally. Good morning, Salena. How are you?
Good morning, Sunshine. How are you?
I'm great because I read your column yesterday, and I just want you to tell people, then go find it at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, about the bubble and how deep the bubble is. And I leave the bubble half the year, right? I get out of the bubble half the year, which is the Beltway. And so I talk to normal people. But it was really a very fine column. My compliments to you on it. Tell people about the bubble and what people are talking about outside of the bubble.
Well, people outside of the bubble are not just not as obsessed as the bubble is about discussing. And what I mean by the bubble, not just the news, but social media, everything, everything that, sort of our cultural curators put out and we consume, right? And people are not as obsessed, in fact, not even remotely as obsessed as they are about politics. It doesn't define their life. It doesn't say who they are. And they're talking about other things. They're talking about inflation. They're talking about the border. They're talking about their children's education. They're talking about roads and bridges and, things like that. The price of eggs, which is still high. And, it's not Trump Biden all the time. In fact, and I thought the political science professor made a really, really good point in that he's saying the news is trying to make us repeat the Trump Biden 2020 election. And I don't think that they understand how horrible a year 2020 was for them, not just in politics, but also their lives were completely changed. There isn't a person around that didn't lose someone, or either through illness and or through the mandates and the politics of COVID. Their children's lives were changed in school. Their jobs were changed. Nothing, their cities changed. Nothing is the same. And the news keeps repeating Trump, Biden. And people are just tired of it. They don't want to relive that again.
And this is the point I wanted people to hear you say. You did a long cross-country trip. Where did you drive on the back roads?
Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, Nebraska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Missouri, Michigan, Wisconsin, and back through Ohio and home.
Heartland tour. And as you do, you talk to people, and they're not eager to talk about Trump or Biden. Is that a good, fair summary? They're eager to talk about a lot of things, but they're not eager to talk about Trump, Biden.
Yeah, their lives are not defined by those two people.
And so I did Candidate Casino with Brett Baer on Friday night, and I said 40-40, $40 on Trump, $40 on DeSantis, 10 on Haley, and 10 on the field. The former president's mad at me because he's further ahead in the polls. I just don't believe he's campaigning. I don't think you can win the nomination if you can't campaign because you're in trial. What do you think, Salena?
I don't disagree. And even when he wasn't on trial and he went to Iowa and I was in Iowa, you don't go to Iowa for 1 hour. Anybody that covers caucus politics, you don't spend 1 hour in Iowa. Yes, there were, and then you don't spend it with bringing people from Florida there to troll the person that you're running against, meaning Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. You go to Iowa and you shake hands and you go to their barbecues and you go in their living rooms and you listen to them. And that's what many of the other candidates are doing, and he is not.
8 years ago, he brought his helicopter and gave kids rides at the Iowa State Fair, which was one of the brilliant moves I've ever seen before, the Trump helicopter, giving kids helicopter rides. I just thought, my gosh, that's a genius move. Who do you think won the debate, Vivek, Nikki, or Mike Pence, or Ron? Who do you think won, Salena?
So I watched it in a bar, and I took it from their point of view. And from their point of view, it was Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek.
Oh, that's interesting, because I thought Ron DeSantis and Vivek won, and I said that on Special Report, and Ambassador Haley joined me a little bit later. What did they think of Vivek?
They thought he was interesting. I'm not sure that he is the one, but I think they liked the youth. I think they liked different message. But I think at the end of the day, if you look at my story, it's Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis. Look, voters want someone who can govern. They also want someone who can punch back. Those two at this moment fit the bill.
And I think Vivek also has energy on his side, but so did Ambassador Haley and so did Governor DeSantis. That's why I didn't put him in the I just put him in the field for my $10 bet. But if he keeps talking to everyone all the time, but I do think the former president has got to get out and campaign. The polls are not going to do it for him. Salena Zito, everything she writes is at salenazito.com. You can ask for an email update of everything that she writes. Do follow her on the site formerly known as Twitter, now known as X, at Zito Salena. I'll be right back. Hour 2 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead. Thank you, Salena. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Speaker McCarthy was on with Maria Bartiromo yesterday. I do want to review what the speaker had to say. I think he's a fabulous speaker, and he's doing a great job. And he was talking about serious things. I'm going to contrast this with the UFO talk in just a moment. But first, Kevin McCarthy talking with Maria Bartiromo about President Biden and Maui, cut number 17.
Well, it is devastating. I come from a firefighter family, and to look at the number of deaths, but more importantly, the hundreds of Americans still missing, and to have the leader of this nation say repeatedly no comment, that is unacceptable. There are so many mistakes that have happened that could have protected American lives. There are so many things that could have happened that could have protected this fire not to happen in the first place. So I will be going to Hawaii to look at Maui and see ways that we can improve that. In the world today, this has got to stop, but more importantly, it is unacceptable to say no comment to the American people and those who are still missing. We are going to do all that we can to make sure we help you.
Then the speaker went on to talk about the investigation into President Biden, which is widening as every day passes, cut number 18.
One of our goals is to change Washington. We're tired of these omnibus bills where Congress doesn't do their work like their appropriations. So in the debt ceiling, we put a provision in there. If you didn't do your job, there was a 1% cut across the board. It made a lot of members mad, but they're actually doing their work. I don't believe we'll have enough time to pass all the appropriation bills by September 30th. So I would actually like to have a short-term CR only to make our argument stronger. Because, Maria, if we shut down, all of government shuts it down, investigation and everything else, it hurts the American public. But if we're able to pass our appropriation bills, we're in a stronger position to remove those Pelosi policies that are locked into law right now, the wokeism, the overspending, the non-security of this border. We want to secure the border, make us energy independent, make our streets safer, and let our parents have a say in their kids' education. We can't do all of that. And you want to go into that debate with the strongest hand. So if we could pass more, do a short-term one would make us in a stronger position, because over in the Senate, I'm sorry, the Republicans and Democrats are voting 97% to spend even higher than what our debt ceiling agreement agreed to. And we're in this discussion together, and so we've got to have a stronger hand. And I want to put us in the position to be able to get greater savings and take away all those Pelosi policies.
Leverage only works if you have leverage. And right now what the speaker is arguing with his caucus, give us some leverage. Let's pass the appropriations bills, put them on the Senate desk where Democrats are in charge, and demand that they send us back a bill. Because right now, the House has to originate appropriation bill. They cannot not sit there and send something over. I mean, they can. The government can shut down. It will not work. It is a bad strategy. Cut number 19, the impeachment inquiry on Joe Biden.
Well, Maria, first you've got to understand, only because Republicans took the majority have we found out what President Biden told us when he was running for office is not true. He said he never had any dealings with his son's business, and that he never even talked to him. We've now found out not only did he call into the meetings, he went to dinner, and after the dinner, Hunter Biden got a new Porsche, that there was $3.5 million transferred. We now found out as he was a sitting vice president, the family created 20 shell companies. They received 16 of 17 payments from Romania, while he was vice president. We now found that the money would flow to 9 family members. He has to continue to change this. But since then, we found a movement of his administration of weaponization. We found that now the special prosecutor, David Weiss, actually let the statute of limitations run out on Hunter Biden's taxes. We found that the FBI actually informed Hunter Biden and the inaugural committee prior to our ability to go and interview him. We also have a DOJ that tried to give a sweetheart deal to Hunter Biden, and the judge said no. So if you look at all the information we've been able to gather so far, it is a natural step forward that you would have to go to an impeachment inquiry. And just so your viewers understand what that means, that provides Congress the apex of legal power to get all the information they need. Because remember what's laying out there right now. We have an attorney general that could have lied to the American public, which he has now named a special prosecutor. They have said 2 different things, and you have Gary Shapley on a little later today, IRS whistleblowers that have come forward that show that there's 2 forms of justice when it comes to America. But now when you look at this, it looks like a culture of corruption that's been happening within the entire Biden family. You've got to get to be able to answer that to the American public. The American public deserves that answer. Who's lying? What information went on? Who paid? And what foreign governments, when you found now that we know that an FBI actually had an informant, which got to a form of a 1023, claiming that they had bribed then vice president and saying that we would never find the money because they went through shell companies and withheld that from the IRS individuals investigating.
I got to tell you, he was very good. The speaker is very, very good on TV. And I also want to give you something I wrote down yesterday. I have been listening to, and I finished the biography of Chester Nimitz by E.B. Potter. And I've been listening to it. It's been my walking companion, my resting companion. I like to listen to books on tape to redeem the time of workouts and anything else that driving, that sort of stuff. I don't much listen to talk radio that's not my own. But I do listen to lots of biographies. And I didn't know much about Chester Nimitz because while there are only 6 5-star officers to come out of World War II, the President's Naval Aide, Admiral Leahy, which was kind of an honorific, but the 5 guys who mattered were Marshall, Eisenhower, MacArthur, and Nimitz. Those 4 guys were fighting the war. And I mean, Marshal Zhukov matters, but he won one of ours. He's the Eastern Front hero. But in the Pacific, it's Nimitz and MacArthur, and in Europe, it's Eisenhower. And there are other personalities that matter a great deal, but Marshall is the man who's orchestrating it all. And Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, I didn't know anything about. I can't recommend a book more highly than I do Chester Nimitz by E.B. Potter. And the reason I bring it up is that the most remarkable part, there's a lot of remarkable things in this book. He graduated from the Naval Academy in 1905, so he's in his prime when he takes over as SINCPAC in 1941 and guides the United States to victory in the Pacific. But there's lots of hard lessons along the way, and I admire his leadership quality. But after he finishes a tour as the Chief of Naval Operations, he retires, sort of, and then he doesn't know what to do with himself. In the last chapter of the book, the last year, he lived to be 81, so the last 10 years of his life really he's just bored out of his mind, and he redeems them in a variety of ways. And one of the variety of ways he does that is that he clips out a prayer of restraint that a friend sends him, and he keeps it near him, which I just clipped out myself. Lord, thou knowest better than I know myself that I am growing older, and someday will be old. Keep me from getting talkative, and particularly from the false habit of thinking I must say something on every subject on every occasion. Release me from craving to try and straighten out everybody's affairs. Make me thoughtful but not moody, helpful but not bossy. With my vast store of wisdom, it seems a pity not to use it all, but thou knowest, Lord, that I want a few friends at the end. Keep my mind free from the recital of endless details. Give me wings to get to the point. Seal my lips on my many aches and pains. They are increasing, and my love of rehearsing is becoming sweeter, and my love of rehearsing them is becoming sweeter as the years go by. I ask for the grace enough to listen to the tale of others' pains, Help me endure them with patience. Teach me the glorious lesson that occasionally it is possible to be mistaken, and that even I may be mistaken. Make me reasonably sweet. I do not want to be a saint. Some of them are so hard to live with. Help me extract all possible fun out of life. There are so many fun things around us, and I don't want to miss any of them. I think that's fabulous. And I wish Joe Biden would tape it on his mirror. Because Chester Nimitz lived to be 81, the president is 80. And he ought not to be president. He's too old to be president. I also want to tell you two things about Chester Nimitz that I didn't know. They were non-practicing Christians, meaning they didn't belong to an organized church, but he was a very man of great faith. His daughter, who was educated by Dominican nuns in a convent because they were afraid for her safety during World War II, converted to Roman Catholicism and became a nun. And Nimitz and his wife's reaction to that, they're not Catholic, is really extraordinary. It's really the payoff of Nimitz. As his all but adopting in name 4 Hungarian refugees who were part of this Dominican convent school. The guy is such a wonderful human being on every level that it is a shame that more, everybody knows about Ike, everybody knows about MacArthur, a few people know about Marshall. Everybody ought to know about Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz. And so I recommend E.B. Potter's biography to you. Don't go anywhere. I'm coming right back. Mike Gallagher, Congressman Gallagher, memorialized the 13 fallen warriors over the weekend, something Joe Biden could only do in a statement that did not list their names. He has never spoken their names. I do not know why. Abbey Gate 2-year anniversary over the weekend. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. Heroism wasn't in short supply. That is the conclusion of James Hasson and Jerry Dunleavy in their brand new book, Kabul. Kabul's become a bestseller, and I talked to Jerry and James a couple of weeks ago, but the second anniversary of the Abbey Gate bombing was this weekend, so I asked them to come back this morning. James, good morning. Are you surprised that President Biden and Secretary Austin issued statements that did not even name the 13 fallen people at Abbey Gate this weekend?
No, I can't even say that I am. I'm disappointed, but I'm certainly not surprised. In Kabul, one thing that we pointed out is that President Biden has never publicly stated the names of the 13. Not on Memorial Day, not on the first anniversary of the attack, not at the State of the Union, right afterwards. They want this to go away. And one of the reasons that we wrote Kabul was to honor the heroism of those 13 and to make sure that the American people know the full story.
Now, James, the details about the suicide bombing at Abbey Gate may be the most disturbing part of a disturbing book. And the reason Kabul is so disturbing is it lays out the breadth and depth of the leadership failure, not among the people on the ground, but in D.C. And the biggest leadership failure was the failure to prepare for the evacuation and then to allow the sniper to take out the bomber. Would you tell people about that, James?
Yeah, taking those one at a time. First of all, the failure to prepare for the evacuation and the decision to give up Kabul or give up Bagram. One thing that we point out in Kabul is that the suicide bomber himself was in prison at Bagram Airfield on August 15th when the Taliban overran it. And if we hadn't given up Bagram, he would have been behind bars on the 26th rather than standing outside of Abbey Gate. But to your point about the intelligence leading up to it, one thing that we lay out in Kabul in very extensive detail and in the Pentagon's own words is that they had very solid intelligence that ISIS-K was moving to hit the airfield. They had a pretty good description, if not a identical description of who the bomber would be. And there were 3 opportunities that we detailed that they missed, or they could have used to take out and prevent this attack. And the first one was on the 24th. There was a targeting package for an ISIS-K location in Nangarhar, and that was the location of an individual that we ended up hitting on the 27th after the bombing to prevent a follow-on attack. But we didn't hit them on the 24th out of fears of a negative Taliban response. And then the second thing that we reveal is that an officer testified in an interview with the Pentagon that military intelligence had tracked ISIS-K to a hotel 2 to 3 kilometers from the west, and that because we were relying on the Taliban for our security, General Donahue had to ask the Taliban to raid that location, and of course they never did. And the final piece of this was what you mentioned with Marine Sergeant Tyler Vargas Andrews, who testified in front of Congress that he had a person who matched the description of the bomber in his sights the morning of the bombing. And Army PSYOPs confirmed that he matched the description. He asked for permission to take the shot, and his battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Brad Whitehead, said, "I don't have the authority to give you that shot." And they asked in no uncertain terms, "Well, then who does?" And he said, "I don't know." And they never got an answer. The man disappeared into the crowd, and hours later, there was the carnage that we all saw on our TV screens.
Jerry Dunleavy, your co-author, has joined us. Jerry, I'm holding Kabul. I've been on Fox a few times, and I've had the book in the background a few times. But you guys are not out in public the way. I really do believe that friends of the Biden administration and friends of the Pentagon senior brass are keeping you guys silenced. I've had that confirmed for me. Is that your experience as to why Kabul it's a bestseller, but not thanks to any television coverage?
Well, it is a bestseller, and there's been great response for the book for sure. And the great Catherine Herridge of CBS News did have me on to talk about it. So there has been a little bit of breakthrough there. But yeah, I mean, of course, this is a politically damaging topic for President Biden. I think that his approval rating took a permanent hit because of this debacle. It never recovered, and it potentially never will, because I just think that it put to rest the idea that President Biden was competent. And I think more importantly, I think it put to rest this idea of the empathetic president, because leaving tens of thousands of Afghan allies behind, leaving Americans behind, especially when he had promised days before he left them behind that he would not leave Afghanistan until all Americans were gotten out. A country being handed over to the Taliban, 13 Americans getting killed in an ISIS-K terrorist attack that I think, as we lay out in the book, was very likely preventable. These are not the actions of an empathetic commander-in-chief. And I think that some of those qualities that people were hoping President Biden had, you can't really claim that he has them now. And so this is a damaging topic. And so a lot of the media has moved on very quickly from this. And the Biden administration is stonewalling Congress and stonewalling anyone else who's continuing to pursue answers on it. So I think that explains a lot about why there's a little bit of a blackout. But we are breaking through, and we continue to hope to break through further.
I want people to go out and get Kabul and send it to your friends left, right, and center, because people need to know the facts. James, you're a Marine. Over the weekend, 3 Marines died in a helicopter crash in Australia. 1 Marine Corps pilot died in San Diego at Miramar in a crash landing. Marines know, and the 11 Marines who were killed, the Navy corpsman, the Army sergeant, that they went into harm's way, and they were willing to do that. But I think Marines expect more leadership than they received from Washington, D.C. Do they not? Do they have a right to expect more than they received in the closure of Kabul?
Well, first of all, just to correct the record, I was in the Army.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were a Marine.
Great friends in the Marines, but man, I would get some phone calls if I didn't let that one slip. But but to your broader point, Hugh, and we lay this out in Kabul, is that the Marines on the ground at the gates and the paratroopers in the 82nd were just dealt with impossible tasks and witnessed really horrific things. But one thing that came through in a lot of our interviews while we were preparing to write Kabul with these 19, 20, 21 year old junior enlisted, and then also the officers in charge of them, was that They felt that they got no direction from the very top. They felt that there had been no accountability. One common trope is that if a soldier loses a rifle, they're demoted and disciplined. And if a general botches a major operation, then nothing happens. And I think that unfortunately, we look at General Milley staying in his position. You look at Secretary Austin still in his, and even to the State Department, Secretary Blinken. There's been zero accountability, and I think one reason for that, Hugh, is that forcing some kind of accountability would require the Biden administration to admit that this was not the success that it's trying to gaslight the American people into thinking it is.
It's so obviously not a success. Jerry Dunleavy, let me go back and close with you, if you will, and give us the succinct summary. In terms of accountability, is anyone driving in Congress to get a TikTok on the decision to close Bagram and the documents around it? Because it is clearly, I think, probably the worst decision in any particular military matter that I can recall. And I'm a civilian. I'm not even an armchair general. I'm an armchair civilian. But I read a lot of military history. I just don't recall anything as stupid as the decision to close Bagram and the way in which it was done. Is there any investigation that is producing fruit on that?
Yeah. So the House Foreign Affairs Committee is investigating all of this, including the circumstances surrounding the insane and dangerous and foolish decision to close Bagram. I'm an investigator on the committee, but just my disclaimer is I'm just talking as the author of the book. But the committee already received testimony from Command Sergeant Major Jake Smith, who was in charge, who was tasked with having to close Bagram. And he testified to the committee that in early 2021, he was visited by members of the State Department who were doing a site survey. And he told them in no uncertain terms that to do an evacuation through Kabul would be the height of foolishness, and that if we were going to do an evacuation, we needed to do it through Bagram. And of course, that is not what ended up happening. But so the committee already has testimony from, the high-ranking officer who was tasked with this. So everybody knew that closing Bagram was going to be an insane decision, that it was going to make an evacuation a lot more dangerous, that it was going to make, force us to just be running evacuation out of Kabul. Of course, we had to do that then with the Taliban in control of everything and having to rely on the Taliban for security. And then, of course, the simple fact that Bagram had those prisons with thousands of ISIS-K terrorists who were then immediately freed by the business-like and professional Taliban that the Biden administration liked to refer to. And obviously one of those terrorists killed Americans. And so getting to the bottom of that insane decision is obviously a top priority of congressional investigators. And I expect that we'll get answers on that.
So just to close the loop, it's either going to end up on Biden, on Blinken, or on Austin. They're the civilian leaders. Of those three, who do you suspect?
I think that the ultimate decider here was President Biden. I think that his decisions were what put our troops in this position. But Blinken and Austin bear responsibility for all of this as well. And I would just add to all of this that on Tuesday, a lot of the Gold Star families of the 13 are coming to Capitol Hill to demand accountability. And I just encourage everyone to give that a watch, because it's going to be a powerful moment.
Thank you for making sure that everyone has the facts. Kabul is in bookstores now. People ought to go and get it. It's very easy to remember the title, Kabul. Go to Amazon, go to Barnes & Noble, go to your bookstore. Kabul continues to sell because Americans want to know what happened. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, James. Welcome back, America. Josh Kraushaar with the Jewish Journal joins me now. Josh, how did you assess the debate on Wednesday night? Jewish Insider, excuse me.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, going into that debate, to me, there are three Trump challengers that have the potential to kind of bring the MAGA wing of the party together with the more traditional wing of the Republican Party. It's DeSantis, Haley, and Tim Scott. I thought Haley by far had the strongest debate and really challenged Ramaswamy on one of the big differences between them in foreign policy. Look, I thought DeSantis had a fine debate. I thought he held serve. He kind of got across his talking points about his conservative governing record in Florida. He's doing well. I mean, look, if you look at the polls, Hugh, since the debate, national and Iowa polls, both Haley and DeSantis have gotten the biggest bumps out of that debate. So, look, I think Haley is someone who is more liked by the more traditional side of the party, and DeSantis has more play with the more MAGA side of the party, but both have the ability to build the broad coalition that the Republican Party would need to take on Donald Trump in the final round.
Now, I was on Special Report on Friday night, and because of my comments, the former president is not happy with me. Let me play you the two comments. First of all, Brett asked about the mugshot and whether or not it was good or bad. And I don't put the mugshot up because I don't believe in TDS porn. But cut number 23, and then we'll follow it up with cut number 25 for Josh.
Hugh, your thoughts of it and what it means?
I think it inevitably hurts the former president's bid to be renominated. Now, he's still ahead. He's still ahead by a lot. But among the Republicans I know, there are never Trumpers, sometimes Trumper, always Trumpers, and only Trumpers. The always Trumpers are starting to fray a bit because this is a lot. And 4 in a row is a lot to deal with. And they're doing the best they can to make this lemonade. But it's not a good day for the former president. And then we went to Candidate Casino, cut number 25.
Hugh, where are you on the GOP primary after the debate?
Well, since I think Governor DeSantis and Ambassador Haley won, I've moved my chips around. 40 on the former president, 40 on Governor DeSantis, 10 on Ambassador Haley, and 10 on the field. What do you make of my bet? Because it's not where we are today. It's where we're going to be when the nominee takes the stage.
No, I mean, look, I think that's important because the legal challenges that Trump faces, even if voters think that they're bogus, there's a logistical impact on the ability for Trump to campaign. And, the timing of these trials could really be a big handicap. And there are some of those voters who like Trump, like his policies, but might want to look for someone more electable or someone who doesn't have the legal baggage that he does. And there could be a moment as we get closer to the Iowa caucuses where there's some movement. Look, I still think Trump, based on just the political side of things, is still the solid favorite to be the Republican nominee. But there's a lot of questions about what, frankly, whether he's even going to be able to run. I mean, what if he's convicted before the November 2024 election? So there's a lot of questions that are going to be asked by Republican voters. I imagine they'll be raised by the candidates, and it gives someone the opportunity to, emerge as a challenger. The biggest challenge, though, Hugh, is that you have a very divided field of people who are in the somewhat Trump lane. They're almost everyone on that stage last week is divided over the same swath of voters. And until that field narrows and consolidates, and until candidates who don't really live up to their expectations, until they perform, you're not going to see Trump losing that first place position.
The Walker option, where Scott Walker jumped out. He did one debate and said, I'm done. I'm not going to win this. I'm getting out. Will anyone do that, Josh, before Iowa?
Before Iowa, you probably. Look, I think Hutchison, I think, I don't know if he'll qualify for the next debate. Burgum is a big question mark as well. Look, you have a real challenge. You have Tim Scott and Nikki Haley, two very popular politicians in South Carolina. And if one of them kind of emerges as a much stronger candidate, it would probably behoove the other to drop out of the race before Iowa. But I'm not sure if we're going to see that because both have a lot of money. They both have support from big donors. So, ultimately, you may have a situation like we saw in 2016 where Republicans tried to stay in way too long. One primary passed where they probably were due, and it helped Trump in the end. So the question is, how many Republicans are willing to play team ball and try to narrow this field before it gets to Iowa?
A question for an insider like you, Josh, is do we have a predominance of winner-take-all primaries again? I know the California state primary moved to a winner-take-all primary instead of by district. We have a minute. Where do people who get a plurality plus one get all the delegates again?
It depends on the state. I don't have all. California was probably one of the bigger moves in that they changed the rules to allow for more winner take all. I think it benefits anyone who gets 50%, I believe. If Trump got 50% of the vote or more in California, he would get all the state's delegates, which is a change from 2016. But overall, the rule changes in states have benefited the candidate that's ahead. They're less proportional. There's less proportional allocation of delegates. And look, I think that a lot of the moves favor Trump. A lot of the moves were made by Trump-friendly party chairs or county chairs. So I think in the end, as long as Trump is a front runner, he'll benefit from those rules.
Josh Kraushaar of Jewish Insider. I will follow you on Twitter, as I always do. The site, formerly known as Twitter, now known as X. You can as well. Josh Kraushaar, fair and down the middle, always. Josh, thank you. Coming right back, Nikki Haley, Tom Cotton, next hour, America. Now, I want to play one bit from Special Report. We did winners and losers, as is every Friday night, but I screwed up. I blew the dismount. And the reason I blew the dismount is I overprepared. Ted Carter got named the new president of The Ohio State University last week. And so I wrote it down, and they ask you for winners and losers so they can come up with the picture. And 1,000 times I said to myself, don't say Ted Strickland, the former governor and Senate candidate in Ohio. Don't say Ted Strickland. He was a congressman as well. Don't say Ted Strickland. It's Ohio State University, it's Ted Carter. And it's Admiral Carter, not Ambassador Carter. I said, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. So, of course, I said it. Can we play cut number 26?
There's Hugh first.
Ted Strickland, Ted Carter, the ambassador, the Admiral Carter is the new president of The Ohio State University. He's arriving in time for Marvin Harrison's Heisman season. So congratulations to the new president of The Ohio State University.
Loser?
The loser is the judge in Georgia, Scott McAfee. What a nightmare to be in charge of the Trump trial. It's going to be Lance Ito 2.0, and I feel bad for the judge already. So I was not expecting that we were going to get to winners and losers, but when we did, I botched the dismount. I'm sorry, Admiral Carter, but we got your picture up there, and we let everyone know. If you've run the Naval Academy, that's a good credential, and he was the president of the University of Nebraska system, and that's a good credential, though they no longer play competitive football there. The real deal, though, Admiral Carter, 3-star admiral, ran carrier strike groups. That's a lot of responsibility. You can handle 47,000 undergraduates. In fact, I'll bet Admiral Carter walks into a frat that's getting out of control, and that stops immediately. I'm very glad they've gone through 3 presidents in a very short period of time, and swing and a miss, and they need some stability. So they went for pro. All right, if you've run Annapolis, if you run carrier strike groups, if you're a 3-star admiral and you ran the University of Nebraska, it's like Ron DeSantis going to get Ben Sass to run the University of Florida system. Great choice. Very, very great choice. It's, you got to find leaders to run these universities. You can't find educrats. Educrats do not lead. Educrats preside over crazy faculties that are woke. You need leaders. And I'm just so happy for The Ohio State University. I want to play one more thing from Special Report on Friday night, because it's another example of what matters and what doesn't. There was a good package on a Tennessee congressman who wants to have a UFO select committee, and Brett asked me what I thought about it, and I thought we'd gone past that, but here it is, cut 24.
Hugh, your thoughts on this?
Well, I saw Asteroid City today, Wes Anderson's new movie, and I think that's got more answers than the congressman's going to find. It's a waste of time. The Republicans need to focus and execute on China and the Weaponization Committee. And what I mean, and I don't want to dismiss anybody who loves UFOs, is that if there's intelligent life in the universe and they are moving around our world, God does not want us to know about them, and he'll tell us when he does. Moreover, if they've got the technology to come here, they've got the technology not to talk to us, right? But in Asteroid City, which is a very unusual movie, even by Wes Anderson standards, there is an alien. And I think that's pretty much the best alien movie I've ever seen, even though that part, I was laughing out loud at that part. Wes Anderson movies are just hilarious, but this one was kind of weird, long, clunky. But I do not believe in spending a minute of precious congressional time on an alien committee. I really don't. And calling it a national security issue is moronic. If they are here, they're not going to talk to us unless they want to. And if they want to, we'll talk to them. And if they're here, they can blow us all up. This isn't going to be, it's like Mars Attacks is the prequel. That's the only thing you need to know. Coming right back, America. Stay tuned. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Senator Cotton coming up later. Nikki Haley coming up later here on the I said this on Special Report on Friday night, cut number 26 when we did winners and losers.
You first.
Ted Strickland, Ted Carter, the ambassador. And I got the wrong cut. I want to do Candidate Casino. Brett Baer was asking all of us, where do we think the nomination, if we had to bet $100, you only get $100 in chip. How would you put your bet? Cut number 25.
Hugh, where are you on the GOP primary after the debate?
Well, since I think Governor DeSantis and Ambassador Haley won, I've moved my chips around. 40 on the former president, 40 on Governor DeSantis, 10 on Ambassador Haley, and 10 on the field. Now, the reason I do that is because the president didn't do the debate. If you don't do the debate, you're not going to get the nominee. I really believe that in my heart. You cannot not play. Now, he may enter late, as I wrote in the Washington Post, and he may win if he enters late because he dominates these things. But he cannot not campaign. And sitting down with Tucker is not the same thing. Going to one event in Iowa is not the same thing. You have to work for it. Especially, you can't go back-to-back losses in Iowa where DeSantis is picking up momentum and in New Hampshire where the field is split and Nikki Haley is picking up momentum. You can't lose 1 and 2 and expect to win 3, South Carolina with Nikki Haley and Tim Scott in it, and 4, Florida with Nevada thrown in for extra sauce. So the president was disappointed with my bet. I'm sorry, I'm a betting man. When they asked me to bet, if I had to bet $100, I'm not really a betting man. That's what I should have said. I lose every time I bet is what I really need to say. My experience with betting is like Dwayne's and baseball. His love of the Angels is like my ability at betting. Or like Carl at golf or other people at golf. Some things we're not called to, so I'm a terrible bettor. But I do split my bets. I have one bet in Las Vegas. I split the greens. Why? Because then I can tell if I won. I don't have to see the number, right? If it's green, I won. So I split the greens. That's my highly scientific approach to betting. And so I'm splitting the front runners, Trump and DeSantis. So it's not very complicated, but I don't bet the polls because the polls favored Scott Walker at this time 8 years ago. And then the debates happened. And the debates change everything. And they changed. Ron DeSantis picked up momentum. Nikki Haley picked up momentum. Is it a 3-person race right now? No, it's probably a 4-person race with Vivek in there. And Vivek is going to eat away at former President Trump's base because he's very Trumpian. He's like the understudy to the former president. And he's very good, very superb on air. But he's also not working hard enough. You got to work every day. I invited Vivek on for this past half hour. I didn't hear back from him. And you know what? If you don't do every show, every time they invite you on after a debate, you're losing. And I don't know who's running his campaign. I don't know. But Nikki Haley, invited her on. She's here today. Governor DeSantis, he's got a hurricane to worry about, I doubt, and a Jacksonville mass murderer. So I don't think we're going to hear about anything from the governor this week because he's being a governor. But I expect every campaign that is serious to appear on every forum they can appear on which they're allowed to raise money. It's all about small donors. I was kind of stunned in the debate on Wednesday night. Nobody gave their website. And I just, people like, what are you doing? You need small donors. That's the name of the game. It is Vivek 2024, for example, and I think NikkiHaley.com, for example. And Ron, I don't know what Governor DeSantis is. I don't want to get it wrong. You've got to ask for votes and money every day, all day, if you're not doing an event with Iowa or New Hampshire voters. There's really 3 places to be: on a phone, in Iowa, or in New Hampshire. That's it. Every minute that you're not on the phone asking for money, or on the air via phone, or sometimes you can use, as we do, video links, and I would prefer a video link always. If you're not on the air at all times, and I'm the only radio host who covers all of New Hampshire, Keene, Manchester, and northern New Hampshire out of Portland, thanks to WGAN, the big foot in the north. King of the North, WGAN. And Grace Curley. Is Grace Curley signed up for anyone yet? She's our afternoon host at WGAN. And I don't know. Howie shows up too in the afternoon. Howie's fun, but I don't know who he's for either. But Grace comes on right after me. She's a fabulous radio host. And she's apparently just New England listens to her, which is too bad. Grace could do anything, anywhere. But I went on this walking tour of Portland hoping to find WGAN, and I didn't. So I got to find out where WGAN is and drop in some morning and just sit down and talk from WGAN. But if you want to talk to New Hampshire, you come on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Senator Tom Cotton represents the great state of Arkansas. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. I'm good. It's good to be back on with you.
Thank you. I have a very small question brought to my attention by a retired Marine Corps general officer last night. From the fall of the wall until now, we have gone through a bad war in Serbia that Bill Clinton ran. We did not see 9/11 coming. We executed poorly in Afghanistan, disastrously after 20 years. We executed poorly in Iraq. Then we were followed by Barack Obama's disaster in Libya, disaster in Syria, disaster in Iraq, leading to ISIS, the first invasion of Ukraine. Then we had the second invasion of Ukraine. And our 2006 national security strategy under W did not even take China seriously. The question is, how can we be so bad at this? And this is not a Republican or a Democrat question. It's an American question. We have not had any strategic vision since the wall came down. Why?
Hewitt reminds me of something that Bob Gates famously said in testimony in front of Congress, I believe after he left Secretary of Defense, that our record on predicting and planning for the next war has been perfect. Going back at least since Vietnam, if not World War II, we have never gotten it right. And you're right that too often, especially since the wall came down, that leaders in both parties do not have the foresight, the basic appreciation of the context of geography and history in our constitutional system to foresee who would have been our major challenge. For instance, with China, going back to Tiananmen Square in 1989, would that George H.W. Bush had taken a firmer line there, used it to undermine communist authority in that country, and that both parties, H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, and partners in Congress, had not empowered China by giving them first permanent most favored nation status and second entry into the World Trade Organization, which has powered them not only to expand their military, but as almost always happens, once a growing power's economy takes off, to grow their military as well. So there's been a lot of mistakes made over the last 30 years. But we made those mistakes based on poor choices, not based on inevitable trends or forces beyond human control. And therefore, we can reverse them in effect by making the right choices, doing things like rapidly and significantly rebuilding our defenses to prepare for a potential war against China, and therefore hopefully to deter that war, or to signal to China that we're not going to let them get away with something like invading and annexing Taiwan back to the mainland. That kind of firm, quick, resolute response to any kind of aggression coming from China is the best way to deter war from happening in the first place.
So the general obliviousness of America to pending disaster. I mean, we didn't see Pearl Harbor coming. We didn't see Korea coming, and that's MacArthur, Atchison, George Marshall, and Harry Truman didn't see Korea coming. We stumbled into Vietnam, and the Kennedy best and brightest didn't see that killing Diem would result in what happened, 5 more years of disastrous war under Democrats and 2 under Nixon. And then all this, did we give up studying strategy in the American military? Why are we bad at this?
Well, Hugh, I wouldn't lay it at the feet primarily of the American military leadership. I would lay it at the feet of America's political leadership. Just to take the example of Vietnam, for instance, that war did not have to become an American war. It could have been a war where we supported our partners in South Vietnam. John F. Kennedy made 2 key mistakes early in the war. You cited one of them, allowing them to be overthrown and assassinated. He was certainly not a member of the Little Sisters of the Poor, but he was pro-American, and he was the best leader South Vietnam had against communist aggression. But second, he also enabled what became the Ho Chi Minh Trail by being so soft with Russia and North Vietnam and Laos early in his presidency. That war never had to become an American war the way it became from 1965 to roughly 1971. That's the result not of military failures, that's the result of poor political statesmanship.
Oh, okay. Well, let me pause on that. I just finished reading this biography of Nimitz, E.B. Potter's biography of Nimitz. It's fabulous. I've never even knew anything about Chester Nimitz other than he ran the Pacific War along with MacArthur. And he was trained in the hard knock school of realism. Learn, a disaster occurs, you immediately have an inquiry like the Battle of Lady Gulf, where was Bull Halsey, et cetera, and then you correct and you move forward. Kabul, this book about Afghanistan, the exit, we learned nothing in 20 years, Senator Cotton. And you served there. Why could we not learn anything in 20 years in Afghanistan?
Well, I mean, some of this goes back to your initial point. Is what Bill Rood, who you may have known in his years down at Claremont in your time in Southern California, called the Democratic Strategic Deficit. Not just America, but countries like Great Britain, in particular, before World War I and World War II. You know, our societies are not organized along martial lines. They don't appeal to force to resolve disputes in the same way that dictatorships do, like China today, Russia almost always, Iran. And therefore, most peoples, and therefore their leaders, are focused on the pursuits of peace, of commerce, of earning a living, of family, of community. And therefore their leaders tend to be focused on that as well, and they don't focus on gathering dangers over the horizon, as opposed to aggressive dictatorial nations. When that's the way of life you have at home, it tends to concentrate the mind abroad as well. But unfortunately, it's a common recurrence throughout history, especially throughout the history of democracies, is that they don't see the next war coming, or even if they see the next war coming, they'd rather just push it off one more time and hope that it doesn't come. I mean, just think at all the chances that France, but especially Great Britain, had from 1923 to 1939 to stop World War II, or at least make it much less bloody and less protracted than it was, whether it was the Ruhr crisis or the Abyssinian crisis, the remilitarization of the Rhineland, even the Sudeten crisis. Much better to have fought over Czechoslovakia in 1938 than it was to fight over Poland in 1939. Yet Great Britain's leaders, not just Neville Chamberlain, but most leaders, kept thinking, if we just take give them one more concession, turn one more blind eye to their aggression, this will satiate them. This will be the end of the conflict. When in reality, it simply empowers them. And I feel that's what Joe Biden and his administration is doing today in China. Look, I mean, they have Gina Raimondo over in China this week, kowtowing to Beijing, giving them every kind of concession and accommodation possible. All that does is embolden Xi and Chinese communists.
Now, with that long runway, I want to turn to the debate on Wednesday night. I know you're not aligned with anyone. You're not endorsing anyone. You're following the race closely and offering advice. And I'm sure you'll send a copy of Only the Strong to every candidate who requests it. Probably autograph it for him, underline it for him. That's the Tom Cotton's book on defense. What did you make of that debate? And in particular, the first question about the song Rich Men North of Richmond would have allowed a candidate to go anywhere. Nobody went to Afghanistan. Nobody talked about the second anniversary of the collapse at all. I mean, it was kind of remarkable for 2 hours that no Republican brought up Joe Biden much.
Well, Hugh, first off, I'll confess that I had the split screen on with the Red Sox Astros, and I had a little bit more attention on the Red Sox Astros than I did on the debate. But I thought all the candidates there would do a much better job than Joe Biden. I thought, in particular, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, leaders that I know well and have worked with, did a good job of laying out, what is America's national security interest and why we do the things we do. And as you point out, that song, which is kind of an unexpected lead-in to the debate, could be seen not just in terms of economic or domestic policy, of what bad trade policy has done to working-class manufacturing jobs, but also what it means for national security. It is the working men and women of America and their children who, by and large, are cashing the checks that elites in Washington and New York are writing when it comes to national security. Not to say that some of those people don't have sons and daughters who join the military. I know they do. But by and large, it's folks from working class communities, oftentimes the sons and daughters or grandsons and granddaughters of veterans themselves, who are cashing the checks that our leaders are writing, and that we should be more hard-nosed and clear-eyed about exactly why we do the things we do. So, for instance, to talk about Ukraine, I think it's very important to do what Joe Biden never does, which is explain why we support Ukraine for our interests. You know, we're not doing this because it's a charity case. We do it because it's good for America. It's like Ronald Reagan. Why did Ronald Reagan champion the cause of solidarity in Poland or champion the Contras in Nicaragua? Yes, he esteemed them and admired their fight for freedom against communist repression, but he didn't do it just for that reason or only primarily for that reason. He did it because it advanced America's interest to undermine communist regimes in those countries. And just like today, we can admire and respect the brave Ukrainians who have fought against such difficult odds, but we're doing this because it's in America's interest, not because it's a charity case for them.
Do you believe that it's always too little, too late with Team Biden? Because right now the Ukrainians have had a breakthrough in the southern part of the front, but not all the way through to the Sea of Azov. They don't need to get all the way to the Sea of Azov, actually, but they're making progress. They don't have any F-16s. If we'd given them the F-16s a year and a half ago, they'd know how to use them right now in support of their ground advance. Are they ever going to change in the Biden administration?
They've certainly given too little, and they've certainly done it too late. I hope it's not actually too little, too late, because that would mean that Ukraine doesn't have a chance to succeed in the defense of its land against this war of unprovoked aggression by Russia. But you're no doubt right, as we've said many times over the last 2 years, Hugh, going back to before the war started, that President Biden was too timid and weak and scared to do what he should have done, which is give Ukraine exactly what they needed to stop the invasion in the first place, or to, in the early days of the war, to give Ukraine all they needed to stop the invasion from going as far as it did. So, for instance, in the early days of the war, it was the Battle of Kyiv, and the Ukrainians were very effective in bogging down Russian columns of armor coming out of Belarus and stopping that invasion. It was clear once that invasion was slowed down that Russia would shift to the east and engage more traditional armored warfare. What didn't we do? We didn't rush to them more anti-tank weapons, long-range munitions, cluster munitions, tanks and armored personnel carriers, or aircraft that could be used to stop that invasion. It was a day late and a dollar short. Therefore, the invasion was more successful than it might have been. Look what we did last winter. Again, we slowly delivered the aid they need. We allowed Russia to consolidate its position, to dig in, to lay minefields, to lay other kinds of defenses. If Ukraine had had everything it needed when it needed it, their offensive could have started months ago before Russia had a chance to dig in and solidify its position. And now you have in the media, a bunch of Biden administration officials, sniping on background that Ukraine is not fighting the kind of war we would fight, so-called what we call combined arms warfare of infantry maneuver forces plus armor columns plus artillery. Well, one of the reasons they're not doing that to you is that we only do that when we've established air superiority.
Exactly. I love that. Thank you. We're out of time, Senator, but thank you for bringing that up. You can't do combined arms without controlling the skies. Bingo. End of story. Senator Cotton, always refreshing to have you. Thank you. Coming up. Welcome back, America. Ambassador Nikki Haley joins me now. Good morning, Ambassador Haley. Thank you for joining me this morning, and welcome back.
Good morning, Hugh. It's great to be with you again.
I want to begin with the tragic episode this weekend in Jacksonville where a racist gunned down 3 black people shopping at the Dollar General store. Had he been able to get on the campus of Edward Waters University, he would have done more damage, but he wasn't. You were governor in South Carolina when Dylann Roof murdered 9 black people at Mother Emanuel. Why does this keep happening, especially on the political fringes, the racist right wing, the extremists on the right and the extremists on the left, as happened in Nashville, Tennessee recently? Why?
I'll tell you, anytime I hear of something like this, it takes me back to a very dark place. It takes me to, those days where South Carolina was broken and we couldn't believe that this was the first time it happened in a place of worship. We couldn't believe that it happened during Bible study, and we couldn't believe that murderer would have that much hate in his veins. And I think if you go back and you look at, what caused him to be like that, and I'm sure they're going to find that about this murderer as well, is, there's a lot of hate online with social media. We've got a lot of mental health issues, and you combine that with the rhetoric that is happening in America of division and just being able to hide behind, something on social media and getting angry. It causes for a bad cocktail. And when you get that, people die. And we have to stop this. And there is no place in America for hate of any sort whatsoever. We have to call it out when it happens. But we also have to understand every person in America has a responsibility for what you say, a responsibility for how you act, a responsibility for how you raise your children, a responsibility of way things are talking about in the classroom, and a responsibility to not let the narrative of America be to define people based on how they look, how they act, where they're born, what their hair color is, what religion they are, all of that. We have to see every person as a mother, daughter, sister, father, son, brother, and know that every person is a child of God. And, we just can't stop until this stops happening. It's horrible. I feel for those families. I feel for the community. I feel for the state of Florida.
Ambassador Haley, I had Secretary Clinton on half dozen years ago after she had lost to President Trump. And she pegged the number of hardcore racists in America at about 600,000. A number I don't disagree with, just based on percentages. Not even a small percentage of those armed is dangerous. How do we change that climate of hate that leads so many people to act out their violent fantasies, whether on left or the right, whether it's in Jacksonville or it's in Nashville? How do we stop that?
Well, I'll point you back to what happened in South Carolina. I mean, when we had those murders, that was on the heels of Ferguson. And, what we did was very different from what those did in Minnesota after George Floyd and those around the country did, which is they went to riots, they went to violence, they went to, worse behavior. And what we did was we turned away from that fear. We turned toward God, and we turned toward the values that make this country great. And, I'll remind you that it was 60 years ago that Martin Luther King gave that speech. Look at how far we've come in 60 years. That should be the motivation in saying we're not done yet. We're not done yet, but we can do it. We have proven we can do it. And our goal in America is to make today better than yesterday. Our goal in America is to make sure that every American feels a responsibility that Americans take care of each other, that we love each other, and that we continue to teach our children to be that way. And, that falls on the media, that falls on politicians, that falls on leaders, that falls on teachers, that falls on pastors, that falls on parents. And we have to know that and live every day knowing that.
Now, I want to dial out to 30,000 feet over America's history since World War II. And I just talked about this with Senator Cotton. We didn't see Korea coming. We didn't see the disaster of Vietnam coming. We did not see 9/11 coming. We did not execute Iraq or Afghanistan correctly. President Obama blew Libya, blew Syria, did not prevent Ukraine from being invaded the second time. Georgia happened on W's watch, but nobody saw China turning. The National Strategic Document that W produced in 2006 is just like 2 throwaway pages on China. And then this administration did not prevent Ukraine second. What is with America's strategic deficit? Why do we not prepare for the next conflict, Ambassador Haley?
I think it goes back to our intelligence. I don't think our intelligence agencies are up to par. I don't think that we are getting the proper information. If we did, we would have seen the fall of Afghanistan the way it was. We would have seen so many of those other events, and we're just not getting it. And that's why when I'm president, we're going to go back in and fine-tune the mission. Don't forget that when we talk about modernizing the military, make sure that we have the most up-to-date ammunition and equipment to prevent our men and women in the military, we also have to make sure we have the most up-to-date intelligence. And we are archaic in that. And we are not as good as our peers. And we need to make sure that, one, we strengthen those partnerships of intelligence. Two, we get our intelligence agencies back on the mission of saving Americans. And then three, make sure that what are we doing to make sure we have the top of the line information so that we do that. And then that's only the second leg of it. The third leg of it is communicate it. Tell the American people, treat American people like adults and give them the information you have and what we need to do to protect ourselves. Why in this last decade did it not come out that the Chinese were buying up all of this farmland? I mean, food security is national security. Why didn't come up that they were running cables underneath that farmland to our military installations to spy? Why didn't it come up that 90% of our law enforcement drones are Chinese? Why didn't it come up about the harm of the research that was being stolen from the universities when all those millions were going in there? Why didn't it come up that Chinese front companies have been lobbying Congress? Why are we allowing foreign lobbyists in the first place? You know, why didn't it come up that China was developing these neurostrike weapons that can actually engineer and change brain activity of military leaders and groups of people? What more do we need to know than to realize it's not that China's coming. China's already here. They have infiltrated our country. You know,
no, I do not know anything
like,
about the neurostrike weapon, Madam Ambassador. So to fill us in on that, but I know you got a heart out, so I want to give you the last question and take it as long as you want. The most memorable exchange of the first debate was between you and Vivek Ramaswamy, where you said you have no foreign policy experience in it. You have no foreign policy experience, and it shows. My question is, given our disastrous record in foreign policy, does a lack of experience in being wrong matter? Because we've just been wrong.
Well, so to start, the Chinese with the neurostrike weapons, they are the biggest developer of neurostrike weapons, and that is their ability to engineer and change brain activity. And it is, you know, something that we should all be worried about, the same way they're developing hypersonic missiles, and we're behind on that. I mean, look, that exchange at the debate, the problem I had with that is it was just naive at best. It was naive to sit there and think that you can go and give Russia, you know, this part of Ukraine and say, okay, now don't go being friends with China anymore. That's just naive. And we have to keep Americans safe. You can't experiment with this. You can't do that. And we can't be, this was the other part that bothered me, we can't be so narcissistic in America, because we've been that in the past. You can't be so narcissistic to think that America doesn't need friends. It's ludicrous. We need as many alliances as possible. For Vivek to say that we're not going to fund Israel, that we're going to stop funding Israel, we need Israel as much as Israel needs us. They're the front line of defense for Iran. You know, you talk about Russia, Ukraine is the front line of defense to war. We are trying to prevent war. If Putin says Poland and the Baltics are next, believe a dictator when they say they're going to do that. And so giving them a bit of Ukraine, guess what that does to Putin? It leaves him wanting more. It tells China they can go ahead and make the move in Taiwan. It tells Iran we're not serious. That is incredibly naive to sit there and think that that's the way the world functions. I've negotiated with China. I've negotiated with Russia. I've dealt with Iran. These are thugs and dictators. When Putin's talking, Putin's lying. And if you don't get that, then you are not going to be able to keep Americans safe.
Does that position, let me put it this way and close out. Did the debate help you? Did you see online donations tick up? Did you see people show up at events? Did it help you? Because I called you and Governor DeSantis the winners of that debate.
Oh, my gosh, the phones haven't stopped ringing. We raised $1 million in the first 72 hours. I mean, people were, the number of volunteers and signups to our campaign were overwhelming, and we loved it. I mean, look, I love debates because it's a great opportunity for Americans to see who their choices are side by side, you know, hearing their voices, hearing their thoughts, hearing their views, and seeing how they act. And I think that, you know, it was great for us. We're incredibly grateful to everybody that went to NikkiHaley.com and said we want to be a part of this. But it's just the beginning. You know, we're just getting started. We have a country to save, and I'm not going to stop until we save her. And this is about being serious, and it's about being thoughtful, but more importantly, it's about communicating and treating Americans like the adults that they are, and the fact that they are capable of making good decisions. I have faith in the American people. I always have. And so I know that they're going to see the right way on this, and I know that we're going to work as hard as we can to earn every single American's vote.
Ambassador Haley, thanks for coming back. Keep coming back. I appreciate your taking time with me this morning.
Thanks so much. Y'all go to NikkiHaley.com and join us.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.